Welcome to ChiroSphere, where we talk about all things chiropractic and some things not so chiropractic. I'm Dr. Ray Foxworth, your host for ChiroSphere and CEO of ChiroHealth USA, the network that works for chiropractic. Today, we have the honor of hearing from Gary Cuneo, a distinguished leader in the chiropractic profession with a remarkable career spanning several decades. Director at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Executive Director of the California Board of Chiropractic Examiners, and Executive Assistant to the Secretary of the Health and Welfare Agency for the state of California. He closed his career in chiropractic by taking on the role of leading the Foundation for Chiropractic Progress, spearheading national public relation campaigns to promote the chiropractic profession. His contributions have earned him numerous accolades, including the HHS Bronze Medallion Seal Award and the ACA Humanitarian of the Year Award. Today, we're going to delve into Gary's journey, his insights into the chiropractic profession, and his impactful work in healthcare. Welcome, Gary.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
Appreciate you taking time to talk to our audience, and I know they're in for a history lesson, and one that a lot of our doctors need to hear and not forget, because otherwise history tends to repeat itself, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
No doubt. So, Gary, you began your career as the executive secretary of the Board of Examiners in I think in 1974. So what was the landscape of the chiropractic profession like back then, in terms of, the schools, our political strength, research, and just our overall standing? What do you remember from that time?
Well, I mean, first of all, I knew nothing about chiropractic when I joined the chiropractic board. I was looking for a place to stay. Reagan administration, when he was governor, had turned out, and I had to make a decision whether to go back into teaching, which I had done before, or find a place in the bureaucracy and hide, actually, because you had a new administration coming up, and they were all Democrats, and they were looking for Reaganites to block out. What I found was, frankly, not a disappointment, but it was for what it is today. It was almost, you can almost say, an embarrassment. There were multiple chiropractic philosophies fighting each other, and then fighting each other before the legislature. The research that was done by FCER, which did a hell of a job, but it was all predicated on money they were getting from doctors. Unlike, in the healthcare community, you get money from NIH, millions and millions of dollars. The schools, the curriculum was disjointed. Some of them would follow sequence, some of them would not. Politically, I remember when we got one legislation passed, I'd have to go to a legislator's office. I'd have to wait outside, cooling my heels for about 30 minutes. And the best I could get was a low-line member of his staff. Appearing before their committees, you got these little chiropractic jokes and all. So, I mean, it wasn't pretty the first couple of years. But then things began to happen. There's two key things, and tell me if you want me to stop on this, but two key things that I think made a big difference. One was the Council of Chiropractic Education got recognized by the Federal Department of Education as the accrediting agency for chiropractic schools, and almost immediately implemented requirements that there be more of a centralized curriculum, that there would be a sequence, that there be some consideration of the faculty and all that. And those schools that cooperated survived and did very well. Others did not do so well. So I think that did the important thing in terms of unifying the educational programs. By doing that, you unified the leaders that were coming out of those schools after that time. The other thing I thought was significant was the passage, or the Wilkes versus the AMA lawsuit that was initiated, I think, in 1976. This was this was a antitrust legislation that went on until 1987, when Judge Getzendenner voted or ruled that there had been antitrust and fined the AMA all kinds of money. And this really came to a head in 1990 when there was a when AMA tried to appeal and they were successful. This had a great big impact on a whole number of things. Suddenly, it was all right for a medical doctor to work with a chiropractor. It wasn't a violation of the AMA code. Suddenly, we were getting up an opportunity to do research, scientific research by recognized authorities. 1990, we did a what was the first one that was done? Anyway, in 1990, the first, I would say, legitimate research by an outside group did a study on spinal manipulation. 2 years later, the Journal of Internal Medicine did a study. These were pretty credible.
Yeah, they really were, Gary. You know, when you talk about the Wilkes case, as I often tell the story, on the heels of the Wilkes case, I went into practice in '85, and when that opinion came down from Judge Getzendanner, and part of that required all of the different subgroups in the AMA to publish in their journals that their association was guilty of violating the Sherman Antitrust Act, and that it was no longer considered unethical to work with chiropractors. And I used that as a mechanism to communicate with over 500 MDs in my town in Jackson, Mississippi. Sent that out, sent actually an 11-page letter with copies of all of those, and to stress the impact of that decision. When I sent that letter out to 500 MDs, within a couple of days, I got a call from a couple of them saying, "Don't ever send me anything again. Who the hell do you think you are?" But then I also got invitations to speak at River Oaks Hospital, University Medical Center, and then, fast forward, on staff at the VA Medical Center. And I really feel like the tide really shifted as a result of that Wilkes case. It was truly monumental for our profession.
Right. I mean, I don't know if you want me to give you any other examples of what happened since that, as a result of that decision. But I'll give you a cute example. I was working for Secretary Schweiker at HHS, working on appointments, and we had just appointed the first chiropractor ever to a federal advisory committee spot. I get a call from the AMA from their vice president, and of course he didn't know where I had been previously, and he said, "Just want to know if it's true that a chiropractor had just been appointed to a committee." Now this was, 5 minutes after the secretary had signed off on this, so there had to be people all over the place. And I acted dumb. I said, "What's the problem?" And he goes, well, we're not supposed to be talking about this, but, there's been this legal actions. We've got to be careful what we say, and he may not be qualified. So, this thing resonated all over the AMA and all over healthcare.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So, let's kind of talk into or move forward to talking about the regulatory process and how it's helped our legislative agendas. Kind of explain to us how defining the scope of practice in California actually played a role in advancing chiropractic's legislative objectives.
Yeah, when I got there, the chiropractic scope of practice and the act itself was like 5 sentences long. And the bottom line is, if it's not the practice of medicine, then it's okay. Well, nobody could define what chiropractic was because it wasn't defined in the initiative. As a result, it was subject to all kinds of attorney general opinions, lawsuits that were not favorable to the profession. And the state board, even though they wanted to, the state board had to keep dealing with that problem. And finally, they went to the CCA, and I had by that time been started with the CCA, and asked for some help. And our attorney, who was probably one of the best attorneys the profession's ever had, in Mike Schroeder. Our attorney said, "Well, let me look at the law. Let me look at the history." Came back and said, "Look, there's enough history there that what you think is the practice of chiropractic is the practice of chiropractic." He knew it at the time that the initiative was passed, and that was an important thing that you had to be able to prove. So now the question was, how are we going to get the state board to initiate the action so that they would be paying for the legal fees, and we did. So we went to the board, and they were agreeable. Um, they they went to the director of consumer affairs and said, "Look, we want to get this thing resolved. We don't believe your attorneys or the AG's office uh, has the interest or the ability to represent us in this case. There's too many examples where you've taken the medicine's view." They agreed. So the board was then able to hire Mike Schroeder as their attorney.
Nice.
And then over the next 2 years, Mike hit him with all kinds of depositions. And bottom line, CMA gave up. They said, "Okay, we'll accept it. We'll accept the scope of practice as you define it to be, because this is costing everybody too much money." And that's how it ended up. Scope of practice today is the same that we adopted back in, I don't remember what it was, in 1988. There's never been a movement by medicine to try to change that. Some within our own profession didn't think it went far enough. But if we had opened the act up, then that whole thing would have collapsed. That whole decision would have collapsed.
We have a sunset review process in our state, and it's all, everybody kind of gets the willies, if you will, when it comes around, because your law is wide open. Just to share a perspective from our state, we were the second to last state to license chiropractors, 1974, I believe it was. And to show the power and the influence of the medical association, again, I'm not bashing them. This is just the history lesson. Can you imagine having a chiropractic scope of practice act that says in it, nothing in this act shall permit a chiropractor to be reimbursed under workers' comp, personal injury, or health insurance?
Wow.
That was actually in our scope of practice.
Wow.
So it was kind of like, well, if you guys want a license, go ahead and get it, but nobody's going to pay you. And then it took years, to be able to get that kind of language out of there. And it actually took our Mississippi Supreme Court's ruling to reverse that. I mean, it was, so, for those that aren't politically involved, get involved, or at least support those that do, because I'm telling you, things like that can end up in the Practice Act. Look what just happened in a few years back in Texas, where they tried to remove the ability to diagnose. This political legislative stuff, a lot of people don't have the stomach for it or the desire to do it. And so, docs, if you don't, at least donate, get involved, support the associations and those that are willing, because it absolutely, it affects everything you do in the way you practice, how you get paid, how you get compensated. So anyway, that's my battle cry for membership in the state and national associations.
Absolutely.
So, you've experienced this. I've experienced it over the years. You get involved in political campaigns, and I've done everything from licking the stamps to send out all the, the letters to everybody. Obviously, I'm dating myself. They don't use mail much anymore. But I mean, it's got risks and rewards, because you're kind of picking winners and losers, if you will. And if you end up supporting the wrong guy, or the one that doesn't get in, you're kind of toast with the other party. So I'd really like to tap into your experience and let doctors know some of the key factors that they should consider when they're looking at getting involved in a political campaign. So, I mean, what's your advice, Gary? You've got a lot of.
I'm a radical. I should say. I'm a reactionary. I don't know what we call a radical. When I was with the CCA, I guess I'd been there for a couple of years, and we just kind of played around with our scope of practice, and we were trying to get a piece of legislation passed, and we could never get it by committee, because one member of that committee, who was a Republican, would never vote for it. And, it wasn't like we hadn't worked with the association or the Republican Party before. I knew a lot of the guys from my days in D.C., We contributed to them. And I said, we just can't continue. So I talked to my consultant, and he said, what you might want to think about is take out an incumbent, take out a Republican incumbent. That sends the strong message. You just don't tell your people, we want you to vote for this Democrat over here. You've got to weigh in with some significant dollars. And what we did at that time was we contributed $50,000 the month before the campaign for Bob Epple, who was a Democratic candidate. And he ended up winning by 1 or 2 percentage points. In fact, we almost flipped the polls when we got with the 50,000 in there. So you can imagine for a long time, the Republicans didn't like me for sure. I mean, I remember the minority leaders saying, I don't ever want Gary Cuneo to darken my halls.
Oh my gosh.
But the Republicans weren't stupid. They maintained some relationship with some of our doctors, so that then the next year there was a primary where an orthopedic surgeon was running against the mayor of one of the LA counties. Well, we saw an orthopedic surgeon. That was enough for us to get worried. And in fact, medicine really thought of him as someone that would eventually become the president of the CMA or become a legislator. So we talked to this mayor, and likely you have to say about chiropractic, made a substantial contribution. And this was a three-way race. Once again, our vote, our money, the last month was successful in getting him elected. Now the question is, what would have happened if we weren't successful with the race in '88 with Apple or with Mays? There's a rule in politics. The first thing you think about the day after you get elected is how you get reelected. If you've got people that have made a substantial contribution against you that made a difference, you're going to find a way to ingratiate yourself with them again. And even I got invited again to some of the parties. So things began to change, and you can see it in the reflection of how they treated us, both the Republicans and the Democrats. We were going through major issues with workers' comp. We were always successful there. We were getting the tail end of managed care. I don't know if we were that good with managed care as we were with workers' comp. But being involved politically makes a difference. You cannot avoid being involved in politics and expect to be successful when you represent a profession that we're there, but we're not quite there in the healthcare community. If something happens to a podiatrist or the nurse is threatened or whatever, you see the CMA coming there to their defense. I don't think we'd get the same support if something would happen to us. So we have to make sure we've got enough chits, if I could use that term,
Sure.
To survive that kind of arrangement. You can't do it just sitting on your hands. You can't make the assumption because we do good things that the patients are always going to protect us. Patients got their own issues to worry about when it comes down to this. You have to be the one to go out there and make your case with legislators, and that they know you're around, and if they decide to hurt you, there's a price to pay.
Yep, no doubt. It sounds like the politicians understand very well the phrase "keep your friends close and your enemies closer."
Exactly.
Because if they go into that mode after an election, they know you're a potential threat to them, and like you said, being involved in several political campaigns, what I have found is very important and served us well is find the guy that's rising through the local, whether you're voting for him for the dog catcher, the alderman, the mayor, ride that coattail, because they don't forget their friends. I'll tell you a short story about our representative, Greg Harper. He had been involved in Rankin County politics for a number of years, and we got involved in his campaign early on. We had him in to speak to our state association, and we were the first group to endorse him publicly, even before the state. And he was well known and well liked through the medical community as well. Well, fast forward, he gets to Washington, and literally sat down in his office and his chief of staff there, and he introduced me to, this is Ray Foxworth. They were the first group that ever endorsed me. Whenever he calls, we do our best to get what he wants. And I mean, to have that type of relationship with someone, it can certainly happen, at the 11th hour, but when you build that kind of relationship early on, that is critical. And to finish that little story about Greg, so I'm sitting there in his office. He says, well, Ray, is there anything you want, anything I can help you with? And I saw this coaster on his desk, and it's, Greg Harper. It's a little ceramic coaster, House of Representatives. And I said, yeah, I want that coaster. And he said, well, they sell them down in the gift shop. I said, no, Gary, I want that coaster. Or no, Greg, I want that coaster. And so I proudly have that coaster. And he wrote a nice little, inscription on the back of it. But, it's just, to have that kind of relationship with someone doesn't happen overnight. And I'll encourage docs and their staffs and their patients, get involved with these guys, these ladies, these guys early on. Because like I said, in my experience, they do not forget who their friends were early on.
Right. Let me just tell you one more cute story. I don't know if you remember Ken Lutke, Dr. Lutke out of Wisconsin, very active, DC, helped raise money for the ACA. He tells the story that when Tommy Thompson, who ended up being Secretary of HHS, first ran for the state Senate in Wisconsin, he went down there and campaigned for him. Well, Tommy Thompson never forgot. I mean, Kenny never forgot. Thompson never forgot it. Yeah. So that when Thompson got selected by Reagan as the HHS secretary, we went over there and talked to him, and he was terrific. He helped us with the problems we were having with Medicare and things of that nature. So it's great if you can get at the ground floor. There's advantage of doing that, but there's certain satisfaction of getting someone the last month before they
they see that right hook coming.
Exactly.
All right. Hang tight, everyone, while we take a quick break to hear from our sponsors. Welcome back to our podcast with Gary Cuneo. So, Gary, the Clinton healthcare effort was, I think, a critical period for chiropractic. How did that initiative contribute to our success as a profession and getting entry into the federal programs like the VA, Department of Defense, and Medicare? What were some of the major lawsuits or legislative battles that were won during that time frame?
The Hillary plan was a wake up to the profession. We were still not the aggressive organization I think we became later on. Their GR department was, I think, only 3 people, although competent people. But you're running up against the AMA, which, by the way, has hundreds of staff that's just dedicated to our Department of Health and Human Services. When Lou Sportelli became chairman of the board, he ordered an expansion of the department, along with a whole number of other initiatives. He brought in, people that were consultants that were experiencing campaigns, and brought in a vice president in Rick Miller, who had done this before, and we almost overnight became a success. Now, the Hillary thing didn't go anywhere, but it created a lot of support for us because they realized that we were active. We were out there lobbying and doing fundraising. Also, that when I came on board, it was almost set up for me not to fail. And I became the executive vice president in 1995. The first bill that we introduced, I was there for about a month, that went to Ways and Means Committee, was a major Medicare scope of practice bill. I mean, it had all the bells and whistles. The chairman of the committee was a good friend of Ken Lutke. He set it up. The problem was, it had not yet been scored by the Congressional Budget Office. So even though the bill went through without a problem, we had to still deal with CBO. And guess what? The scores were out of this world, awful. Part of the problem was there was no particular landmark the CPO can look at to try to establish. So we were only in the system under Medicare, and very limited as well. So when the bill again came for a second vote, we lost it. But it taught us a lesson that you got to continue to fight for these things. And we were successful in getting a little bit of the Medicare thing resolved. We got rid of the X-ray requirement in one of our legislation. I think where we were really successful is opening up some of the federal departments. The Department of Defense had no chiropractors working for them. The bill itself authorized 13 different chiropractic doctors in various parts of the country. I think that's expanded to the 50s or 60s. The Veterans Administration had no chiropractors. That is even more successful. We had a lot more cooperation from the Department of Veterans Affairs in getting our people in the various places around. We were more successful in increasing the amount of research money we were able to get for our research institutions. And again, I think a lot of it had to do with the Wilkes suit. The NIH actually looked at the possibility and ended up establishing a new institute for alternative health care. And that institute, it's got chiropractors working for it. They had a lot of grants that dealt with chiropractic were approved for the first time. A lot of progress there, but I suspect if you talk to our researchers, they would like to see a lot more. But when you go into the National Institutes of Health, and it's all medicine, okay, primarily, to penetrate it a little bit, I think is quite an accomplishment.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I personally experienced the benefit of us getting into the VA. We have the G.B. Sonny Montgomery Medical Center in Jackson, and I got a call from the chief of staff from the VA, and they had been selected as one of the 17 sites to implement a chiropractic program. So I was on the state board of health at that time. That's how I happened to know him. And we literally started that program from scratch. I was in one room with my table. That was it. And if you go to the VA today, they're on the second floor of the hospital, and it's part of a wing. I mean, it is a very robust program, and to see it go from literally one little office and no helper, no assistant, to having assistants and it literally being part of the wing is just, it's remarkable, Gary. My mom and dad were both chiropractors, and back then the only time you saw a chiropractor in the hospital was if he was dying,
Right, right,
and then
right,
not letting him in then.
exactly.
Crazy. So let's fast forward a little bit more. You led the Foundation for Chiropractic Progress, and I am proudly a member of that executive board. And my gosh, what amazing work it's going on there. Kind of discuss the significance of the foundation, the role of the spokespersons that we have. And I mean, my gosh, we ended up with an Olympic commercial as a result of the
Right,
foundation. What were some of the
right.
major achievements that you saw during your time?
Well, for me, and I'd worked for a number of boards, and all of them were dedicated, and I enjoyed working for them. But the foundation board had people from varying professions. You had business leaders on it. You had uh, college presidents. You had um, doctors and they Kent Greenwald, who really is the one that started all this thing and has done a lot of the funding. He made sure it was a balanced committee. And I have to tell you, we never had an argument. And I know that if I ever went to one of my board meetings, we'd always have an argument. If not with among ourselves, but anybody in the audience. But that was the one thing that's kept it together is Kent would not allow partisanship or philosophies to get involved in the successes. When we started off, the first spokesperson we got was an Olympic gymnast. And she was from Stanford, so she was articulate, and everything that goes with graduating from Stanford. That gave us visibility. We did our first ads in, I can remember which one. I think it's Sports Illustrated, and we went to Washington, went to the Wall Street Journal. Then we graduated to Jerry Rice, who is my favorite as a San Francisco.
Yeah.
Uh, great reputation in the football community, and he was also on Dancing with Stars, so we able to broaden. When we talk about Jerry Rice, we'd go to a certain community and say, well, they don't know anything about football, but they do know about Dancing with Stars.
Yeah.
And we got about 3 years out of him for I thought was a pretty reasonable fee. These guys don't do it for nothing. And he seemed to enjoy his spokesman's responsibilities. We took him out to a couple of colleges, and he really intermingled well with the kids. We had Aaron Rodgers, star for the Jets. His father is a chiropractor, and we did a couple of spots with him. So that just added to the credibility. We started to look at expanding our spokespersons outside of the sporting arena. Dr. Becky Halstead, General Becky Halstead, who served us in Afghanistan, was responsible for hundreds of soldiers, came to us through Malaysia, and was interested in being our spokesperson. I mean, she was outstanding. She'd get up there, and all the students or the doctors were mesmerized with her because she could tell the story. All the MDs could not treat her condition. What the best they could do is give her a whole bag full of pills, and she said that wasn't helping her at all. And after Carl worked with her for you, she became convinced, and she was probably one of our best spokesperson.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to meet her and interact with her on several occasions, and boy, what a powerful little lady. And I say that with a great deal of respect, but she's small in stature, but man, she was a commanding force. No doubt about that.
Yeah, and we sort of expanded on that when she was recognized by West Point for her duties and all, and they actually gave her a room they dedicated a room at this hotel, which is right on campus, to her. And of course, we got a little press out of that.
Well, sure.
Out of that as well. Yeah. So she was great.
So Gary,
I don't want to finish. Let me just say one more thing about.
Sure.
I was running out of time. I think what SCER is doing today is terrific. Dr. McAllister is the president of the F4CP, and the board is as strong as ever. You mentioned being in the Olympics. They were in the Olympics. They're always looking at various opportunities. They have a pretty active PR agency that's helping in that respect. I think it's the most, I have to say, it's probably upset people, but I think it's the most effective national organization that exists in chiropractic right now.
Well, I think it is as well, for its focus, which is positive press for chiropractic, and having attended many meetings with that board and the foundation. You're right. I don't know that there has ever been an instance where we have had, quote, an argument or turmoil. And, Gary, I think that comes from having a very clear focus and purpose. And, it's been my experience that when people look through their personal lens, they make one set of decisions. When they look through the lens of what's in the best interest of the profession, whether it's in my personal best interest or not, you make entirely different decisions. And Foundation's really been blessed with people that truly are not self-serving, they are serving the profession, and they try to make decisions that are in the best interest of the profession. They are apolitical. And so, here's my here's my stump speech for the foundation. Docs, if you're not part of the foundation, you are missing out on a lot, not just because of the advertising that's done on Wall Street, but all of the materials, the ads, the rating, I mean, everything you possibly need to help market your practice on Main Street, wherever you live, is available as a member. And so I would encourage docs to go to, f4cp.org and join. You talk about you don't like the way things are, the way we're perceived. There's still some of that around these days. Well, you
Yes.
change that by public perception, and
Yes.
that is truly what the foundation is dedicated to, and you certainly help lay the groundwork for that, Gary.
Thank you.
So we're getting close to the 24 elections.
I was thinking of moving to Italy myself.
Comment about the shit show we're in the middle of, like we did before we got on air, but I figure I'd go ahead and say we're in the middle of a shit show. I mean, let's.
Kidding. As I said, I'm thinking of moving to Italy.
Oh my gosh,
it's terrible. I mean, it's really, I mean, I have to. I mean, I'm a fallible Reaganite. I never try to hide this.
Yeah.
But the Republican Party does not look anything like the party that Reagan was president.
And nothing looks like it used to with the political landscape. It
exactly.
is.
It's gonna be very close. It's gonna be a very close election, even though there's all this stuff going on with Biden. I think even if he bows out, I'd be really surprised if he does. Whoever takes his position, more than likely Kamala, we'll see the same issues that unify the Democratic Party around Biden will be the same issues that oppose Kamala when unifying around Trump. And I think this goes all the way down to the local area. There are 10 seats in Congress. Well, right now, there's only one seat separating Republicans from Democrats that are in, to control the House. In the Senate, there's one seat or one or two Senate seats. In the House, there are now 10 congressional seats that are considered toss-ups, another 25 to 30 that are considered too close to call. A lot of members of Congress, even those that were on committee chairs, decided they didn't want to do this anymore. They couldn't stand it, okay? I give you that background because if there's ever a time the profession ought to be involved in a campaign, it's now. I was never a big fan of getting involved in presidential races because I thought we always had too many big guys out there to compete with. But now when you're talking about a state where the margin between the two presidential candidates was only one percentage point, and the third party movements were getting even more active. They were with Robert Kennedy. These things are so close that you can really make a lot of progress in promoting the profession by getting involved. You can't just don't do it. You can't be on the sideline. Because when this thing is done and all the votes are counted, it doesn't end up going to Congress to do it. If when all the votes are done, they will be looking at people that helped. And again, they will look at those that didn't help but made a big difference. You got to be part of that mix so you don't get lost. Because again, no one's going to be supporting the profession like other professions get support from the CMA. We got to be doing it ourselves.
I'm sure you know the saying: if you're not at the table, you're on the menu.
Exactly.
We've certainly seen that happen. And again, I'm going to reiterate: with that many seats up for grabs, if you will, or such close races, I think there's never been a better opportunity for us to begin to have more influence. But again, it's going to take working with a campaign. I want to tell one more campaign story about Greg. So when he first ran, it was kind of a close race, with another politician there, and I happened to be president of our state association at that time. And I sent out a letter to our doctors that, while it may not be proper to have political conversations in your office, the reality was we could have a friend in Washington. And so I encouraged all of them to write. I provided a sample letter to them to send to their patients about, hey, I'm your chiropractor. We don't normally get involved in politics when we're here in the office, but this is a critical race. If you don't like what your Medicare benefits are, if you don't like what your coverage is, we need to change those things. And this gentleman is behind chiropractic and chiropractic patients. And so literally thousands of letters went out in the state of Mississippi,
Wow.
to help support Greg.
Yeah.
And so I see that opportunity occurring right now in
Yep.
in every state that's got a toss up race, or where these guys and gals have gotten tired of the crap show that's going on in Washington.
Right.
Now could be probably the most impactful time that we could have by getting the doctors to get their patients involved. And again, you don't have to declare if you're a Republican or Democrat. I vote for the person, not necessarily for the party. And if somebody is pro chiropractic and pro chiropractic patients and leveling the playing field, get behind them. And I encourage the doctors everywhere to do that.
Right. I
It
mean,
is,
even if you're uncomfortable about doing letters, which I think is a great idea, offer your office in the evening for our phone banks.
yeah,
Most
absolutely.
doctors' offices have what, 3 or 4 or 5 phones? It is expensive to set up these phone banks. Now,
Yeah,
more times than not, they will have volunteers there to make those phone calls, or even or make them yourself. Again, this is the kind of thing that you know
grassroots.
everybody will remember what they were doing, what the Caros were doing, and I think that's part of what the game is about.
Yeah, even hosting them at your office after
Yep.
hours, receptions, hosting them
Yep.
at your home. That really is where the relationships are built.
Yeah.
And like I said, they just don't forget that. Well, Gary, I've got a few just for fun questions for you.
Sure.
What talent do you have that most people don't know about?
Well, I don't know if people would think this is a talent. I tie flies on a fly fisherman.
I, and I love seeing those posts of you out on your boat and fly fishing and enjoying life. So
Right.
the next one is, what's the worst job you ever had?
Oh, I guess, God, I don't know. I enjoyed all my jobs, even when I was a school teacher. I enjoyed it. I can't say there was a worst job for me. I was always lucky that I was able to get to the next level and enjoyed every one of them, and no one figured me out. No one wanted to fire me. I
Well,
always left, and they were all upset.
you've certainly been a blessing to our profession, and I personally thank you for all the years, the efforts, and the insights. And even though you have, it's like I tell people sometimes, I may have retired from practice, but I haven't retired from the profession. And I kind of get a feeling that's where you are, because we
Yes,
still get communications from you about the politics, what's going on, what the
yeah.
opportunities are, and it is much
Well,
much.
you gotta read my memoir. I sent a copy to Christy.
So,
That tells about my
is it
last
in book
50
format
years.
now? Is it in
Huh?
book format?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Where can people get a copy of it, Gary?
Well, it's not on the bestsellers list.
Well, that's all right.
I made about 100 copies of it, and I've been giving them out. They probably have to communicate with me. Um, but it does, I mean, a lot of it has to do with my Italian heritage, but there's a good portion of it which talks about the struggles we had in the 50 years I was involved with chiropractic. Um, and it's fun. I enjoy reading it myself.
Well, good deal. So, what is your email address in case they'd like to request a copy?
GCUNEO at AOL.com.
And I still
G
have
is
my AOL account too.
well, I'm not telling anybody that even notices that.
Yeah. I love seeing those because I know whoever I'm sending an email to has been around a while.
Been around. Well, you can imagine trying to get on this podcast.
Yeah.
From my experience.
Well, I really appreciate you spending some time with us today, Gary. And thanks to everyone listening to the ChiroSphere podcast. Please subscribe and share the podcast with your friends, and let us know who you'd like to hear from in the future and what topics you'd like us to cover, and we'll do our best to deliver. If you want to learn more about ChiroHealth USA and how we can help you develop a compliant, profitable discount strategy, call us at 888-719-9990. By partnering with CHUSA, also ChiroHealth USA, and a discount medical plan organization, many doctors have grown their practices by seeing more patients and families, help patients with high deductibles and limited benefits, and seen revenues increase by 20%. They've also seen up to 50% of their CHUSA members renew their annual membership to get the care they need. I encourage you to take time to visit our website at chusa.com, that's CHUSA.com, to find out why ChiroHealth USA is the network that works for chiropractic and you. Make it a great day. Thanks again, Gary.
Thanks. Enjoyed it.